Imagine the person in charge of protecting the nation looking straight at Congress and saying he doesn't give a DMN what anyone thinks of him. That's not a movie script, that's real life. And if that doesn't make you question your safety, your family's safety, and the future of this country, then you're not paying attention. Because what just happened inside that hearing room wasn't just another political argument, it was a moment that ripped away the mask and showed the country exactly how fragile accountability has become. The clash that unfolded wasn't about theatrics, it was about trust, and whether the person sitting in the FBI director's chair can be trusted with the power that office holds. Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett didn't tiptoe around it. She called him the least qualified FBI director in history.
Man, oh man, there has been so much today, and I truly don't know where to start. So I'm just going to make sure that we start off with a few facts. So a couple of facts that we need to make clear for everyone is that, number one, Director Christopher Wray, when he was appointed to be the head of the FBI, was appointed by Donald Trump. Now, I will agree that I definitely take issue with a number of decisions that Donald Trump makes, especially when it comes to the people that he decides to appoint to very important positions, including this one, because I did have to make sure that I wasn't going crazy. But when I say that you are the least qualified FBI director in the history of the FBI, that is real, because you are the only one that never even served with the FBI prior to joining, yet we are supposed to believe that you are the greatest thing since sliced bread. I didn't ask you a question. Now, what I want to go through is to talk about why you are a failure and why, honestly, we just need to tell you bye-bye. I know that you got a little upset and you put on your show for your boss because it seems like you're trying to save your job when it came to talking to Senator Booker yesterday. But let's go through some of your failures. So before you were even confirmed, and I think one of my colleague from Georgia, pointed out that you are already targeting career officials so that you could direct illegal firings. Mind you, these cases that you were so upset about, which are the ones tied to Trump, the cases came through his handpicked FBI director. And frankly, when people sit around and say things like, oh, you know, we're happy because now we feel safe. I don't know who feels safe in this country except for the white supremacists, because I specifically as a black woman definitely don't feel safe. And frankly, my colleagues have been real nice to you today, and I applaud them, but I don't have the same demeanor because I know that multiple colleagues on this side of the aisle have faced death threats. In fact, somebody tried to kill one of my colleagues. And frankly, I don't know if this FBI or under your leadership, if those people would have been caught. I don't have any confidence in you. And if we start talking about the reasons that I lack confidence, we could start with you not just wanting to acknowledge some simple facts. Simple facts like the vast majority of the threats are coming from right-wing extremism. And I know my colleagues have tried to stress this, but I decided that I would maybe do it in a different way. Number one, I have a couple of UCs. Kim Buck, one of multiple Republicans receiving death threats for voting against Jim Jordan as House Speaker.
Without objection.
Another one, Republican lawmaker says she received death threats after voting against Jim Jordan in Speaker's race.
Without objection.
In addition, there was another one from another colleague who now is leaving Congress because they said that they were calling his wife anonymously and threatening her life to the extent that she ended up sleeping with a firearm.
Without objection.
Okay, so here's the deal. How are we supposed to have confidence when you're sitting up here telling the Senate yesterday that it will take you 14 years before you can get the FBI fully staffed to do their jobs? You're also now redirecting resources so that they can go and play ICE agents on the streets. You're getting rid of your most qualified people, and even when it came down to somebody that you consider to be a friend, you were posted up having some fancy dinner to the extent that you posted not only once erroneously, you posted twice erroneously as it relates to catching somebody, and then you want to go and say, let me take a victory lap. Because honestly, if it wasn't for parents deciding that they were going to turn in their child, It seems like y'all wouldn't have got there, even though he literally confessed online. So I'm confused about what it is that the FBI is doing except for trying to put on a show for the apprentice or whatever you want to call him. The day after all of this took place, there was domestic terrorism that was taking place at HBCUs. They were targeted. Yet I didn't hear anything from the FBI about what was going on. And again, black people kept saying, how did we end up in this? Because the numbers are so very clear that white supremacy is a problem. And honestly, I've not heard anything out of you today that makes me believe that you're going to do anything about the white supremacy problem. The one that is leading to children being killed, children being shot, as well as members of their community as they're worshiping in their churches.
The time of the gentlelady has expired. If the gentleman would like to respond to any of that. Well, I mean, I'll respond. Cash Patel, as I said when I introduced him, public defender, former prosecutor, top staffer on the House Intelligence Committee, Deputy Director of National Intelligence with the National Security Council, Chief of Staff at the Department of Defense, and FBI Director. I think that's a pretty good resume for the guy who's now running the top law enforcement agency in our country. And we've seen all the stats that he's given to the committee on how much better they're doing at getting the bad guys than the previous guy was doing. With that, I recognize the gentleman from South Carolina.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Director Patel, I think you're witnessing some auditions, clickbait auditions for the Academy Award for my Democratic colleagues. We'll see how they fare as they're on MSNBC later on today. But do you care, before I launch into my line of questioning, to respond to Ms. Crockett from Texas on that very elaborate and theatric display?
Here's what I've learned in my government service. I don't give a damn what they say about me as long as I'm succeeding in the mission. We're succeeding in the mission because the men and women of the FBI have never been empowered to do more work and to hit the streets harder than by President Trump's authorities and resources he's given us. And so all I care about is that we are capturing more child predators than ever before, taking more drugs off the streets than ever before, that we are capturing murderers at a significantly historic rate, and we're delivering this country the lowest murder rate in recorded history. That are facts that you cannot dispute. But you can come at me all you want. I don't care.
Thank you, Director, for that, and we appreciate your service. We appreciate the results speak for themselves, I think, pretty plainly, and your commitment not only to results, but to transparency, so we do appreciate that.
Those words weren't exaggeration, they were a brutal assessment of what everyone was already thinking, but few dared to say out loud. And in that moment, millions watching had the same realization: this isn't about partisan bickering. It's about whether the most powerful law enforcement agency in the United States is being run by a man chosen not for skill but for loyalty. Every single FBI director before him had a career inside the Bureau or decades of law enforcement experience. They came up through the ranks, learning the institution, earning the credibility to lead it. Not this one. His resume reads like a list of political appointments: a staffer, a loyal advisor, a defender of a single man's agenda, not one day as a field agent, not one case worked inside the Bureau, and yet he was elevated to the top spot, given the keys to the most powerful domestic law enforcement machine in the country. Ask yourself, how does that happen? How does someone leapfrog every qualified career professional to land in that chair? The answer, as Crockett made clear, is chilling. Competence wasn't the qualification, loyalty was. He wasn't put there to strengthen the FBI, he was put there to make sure the FBI bent to the will of one man, and that should make every American uneasy. Because when loyalty to a politician outweighs loyalty to the Constitution, you don't have justice anymore, you have enforcement of power. That's the kind of shift that changes a democracy from the inside out. But Crockett didn't just stop at pointing out the resume gap. She dug deeper, exposing the dangerous moves he made even before he was confirmed. Reports surfaced that he targeted career officials for politically motivated firings. Think about that. Before even being officially sworn in, he was allegedly purging people inside the Bureau to make room for those more loyal to his benefactor. That's not leadership, that's sabotage. That's how institutions get hollowed out and twisted into something unrecognizable. And once that happens, the damage doesn't just stay in Washington, it ripples out into every community. Crockett spoke from experience, and it hit harder because of that. She said plainly that as a black woman she doesn't feel safe under his leadership. Let that sink in. The director of the FBI, the person responsible for protecting Americans from threats foreign and domestic, inspires not confidence but fear. And it's not just her. She reminded the committee that colleagues on both sides of the aisle have faced death threats, some so severe that their families were terrorized. One lawmaker's wife was threatened to the point that she slept with a firearm. Others were targeted simply for voting against a speaker candidate. These aren't hypotheticals. These are real threats, happening right now, inside the supposedly safe halls of American democracy. And what did the Bureau do under his watch? Redirect resources. Instead of focusing on these very real threats, agents were pulled to play the role of immigration officers. Resources shifted away from countering domestic extremism and toward enforcing a political agenda. That's not protecting the American people. That's reshaping the mission of the FBI to match one man's narrative. And the cost of that, communities left vulnerable. Threats ignored. Americans asking themselves whether their government has their back anymore. The most devastating part of Crockett's argument was when she named the threat that too many in power refuse to acknowledge white supremacy. The numbers are crystal clear. FBI and DHS intelligence reports for years have shown that the most significant domestic terror threat in this country comes from right-wing extremism, specifically white supremacy. That's not partisan spin. That's not a talking point. That's data. That's fact. And yet in front of Congress and the nation, he wouldn't say it. He wouldn't acknowledge it. He wouldn't confront it. Why? Because it doesn't fit the narrative of the man who put him in power. So instead the Bureau looks the other way. While black churches are burned, while synagogues are attacked, while HBCUs are threatened, while communities are left to grieve in silence, wondering why the agency tasked with protecting them is pretending the threat doesn't exist. And when pressed on all of this, his response wasn't reassurance, it wasn't accountability, it wasn't humility, it was arrogance. I don't give a damn what they say about me, he declared. Think about that. The FBI director dismissing Congress, dismissing oversight, dismissing accountability to the American people. That's not toughness. That's contempt. That's a message that says I don't answer to you, I answer only to the one who put me here, and if that doesn't terrify you, it should. This moment wasn't about political theater. It wasn't about Democrats versus Republicans. It was about whether Americans can trust that the agency designed to keep them safe is actually serving their interests, or whether it's serving the political agenda of one man. Crockett's words cut through the noise because they weren't about spin. They were about lived reality, about colleagues facing death threats, about families in fear, about communities under attack, and about the silence of an FBI that has lost its way. What she exposed was simple but devastating. The FBI director isn't there because he earned it. He's there because loyalty was prioritized over competence, and that has consequences, real life and death consequences, because when the Bureau ignores the most pressing threats, people die. When the Bureau shifts resources to play politics, communities are left unprotected. When the Bureau's leader dismisses accountability, democracy itself weakens. Ask yourself, do you feel safer today? Do you believe that threats against lawmakers, against communities of color, against religious minorities are being taken seriously? Or do you feel like Crockett does, that the FBI under this leadership can't be trusted? These aren't rhetorical questions. They are the questions every American has to grapple with, because safety isn't abstract. It's not statistics on a page. It's whether you can worship without fear, whether your children can walk into school without being targeted, whether speaking out against power puts a bullseye on your back. And right now too many Americans can't answer those questions with confidence. Crockett didn't soften her words, and that's why her moment mattered. She looked the director of the FBI in the eye and called him what he is, the least qualified in history, and she laid bare what that means for the rest of us. Because this isn't just about one man, it's about a government being reshaped from within. It's about the normalization of putting unqualified loyalists into positions that hold immense power. It's about whether the Constitution still comes first, or whether we've accepted that loyalty to a single figure now defines who gets to wield authority. And here's the truth, if moments like this fade into the background, If the outrage dies out, then the silence will do the damage for us. Silence is what allows corruption to grow. Silence is what allows incompetence to harden into the new normal. That's why it matters to keep talking about this, to keep amplifying it, to refuse to let it be swept aside, because accountability doesn't happen in the dark. It happens when the people refuse to look away. So when you watch Crockett stand her ground, understand that she wasn't just challenging a man, she was challenging a system that rewards loyalty over competence, that shrugs off oversight, that refuses to name threats staring us in the face. And if she sounded raw, if she sounded fierce, that's because the stakes are that high. She wasn't auditioning for the cameras, she was speaking truth in a room where truth has become dangerous to say. This isn't about left versus right. It's about whether you believe the FBI should protect all Americans, or just serve the interests of those in power. It's about whether the director of the FBI owes his loyalty to the Constitution, or to the man who put him in the chair. And it's about whether ordinary people, from churchgoers to college students to lawmakers and their families, can live without fearing that their government has abandoned them. That's why this moment matters. That's why her words ring out far beyond that hearing room. And that's why it's up to all of us not to ignore it. Because the more he tries to brush off the truth, the louder it needs to be repeated. The more he pretends not to hear it, the more it has to echo, until accountability is unavoidable. If you believe in accountability, if you believe the FBI should serve the people and not politics, then make sure this story doesn't get buried. Share it, talk about it. Leave your thoughts below and let your voice be part of the conversation. And if you want to keep hearing the stories that cut through the noise and expose what's really happening, hit that subscribe button, turn on the notifications and join us. Because this isn't the time to look away. This is the time to demand better, louder and stronger than ever before.